All right, everyone. Are we ready? Yeah? Did you enjoy the keynote? It was good? Awesome. So, of course, today we're here to talk about finding your audience. We have some amazing panelists with me. So we have Sophie from Firemonkeys, we have Henry from Yodo One, we have Ken from Mountains, and we have Matt from Hipster Whale.
Hello.
So I would obviously introduced you already with your beautiful names, but would you like to talk a little bit about yourself and your role?
Sure.
We'll start with you, Sophie.
Hi, I'm Sophie. I've been a producer in the games industry for about 7 years across the UK and Australia. So I've worked for indie devs, indie publishers, and now I'm working at EA at Firemonkeys in Melbourne, working on real racing.
Hey, I'm Henry from Yodo One. I'm the CEO and founder of Yodo One. We publish games, so we've been very fortunate to work with some of the very top talent in the industry. I think I worked with you before when you're in China, right? Spicy Horse. Worked with Matt, obviously on Crossy Road. So hoping to work with a lot more talented Australian teams, and that's kind of why we come back every year, right?
My name is Ken Wong. I'm the founder and creative director of a studio based here in Melbourne called Mountains. We released our first game this year called Florence. You can check it out on the App Store. Yay. I was also the lead designer of a game called Monument Valley. And yeah, really happy to be here today.
So I'm Matt, and I'm from ClickTalk and Dappernorts and Hipster Whale and Boom Whale and Hipster Sprockets and probably...
Monkeys.
Yeah, Mighty Games, a lot of different roles. Yes, at the moment, I'm probably most well known for the co-founder of Hipster Whale, where we made Crossy Road, Pac-Man 256 and Disney Crossy Road, and now Piffle.
Oh,
this which is on your lanyards, of course. So we're going to be covering a few things about... Ooh.
Whoa,
Ooh.
Cool.
That was a nice noise. Thanks. We'll be covering a few different aspects of finding your audience because it is very multifaceted and nuanced, of course, and there are different audiences that you can access, and everyone here that's made games has access to different audiences as well. So my first question for you all is, how do you identify your audience? So even before you go out and try to find them, how do you understand who you want to make games for? If somebody would like to jump in.
It's a very difficult question. The audience, I think, is like when I first started going into games, I was, I figured I'm going to make games that I like to play. Like I think that's where everyone starts. But when I first started ClickTalk, which was in 2008, there was a particular opportunity where the bedroom coders were starting to come in again, and they were playing a lot of hidden object games. And I wanted to be a bedroom coder, so I thought, well, let's try to do that. So I drew on my love of Where's Wally and all those sorts of things and tried to make a game that was, I knew the audience for these hidden object games was quite casual. And so it was actually a really interesting process, which I badly failed on, where I wanted to make a hidden object game that was nice and casual, but actually I realized later that the people playing those hidden object games were the most hardcore 70-year-old women that you could ever possibly meet in your entire life. And they hated my game. They despised it. And I was really lucky that just a few months after releasing Little Things and having it flop, that the iPad suddenly appeared, and then this new iPad tablet platform, my audience was there. It was just luck that I fell into it.
We're just going this way.
Just whoever wants to jump
Finding
in,
your
go for
audience
it.
isn't always intentional.
That's true.
Yeah, I have a story. So in 2013, I joined a company called Us2. And Us2 is not a games company. They're sort of a digital design agency. So they make apps for like banks and H&M and Sony Ericsson. And that work was funding this small games team. And because they were funding it, I was like, oh, like they're funding our work. I want to make a game that's going to impress digital designers. So they're very tech savvy, but they don't play games necessarily. And this was like in sort of this hipster area of London. So like they're all like, you know, really very hipster. So I thought we were making a game for hipsters, and that's how Monument Valley came to be. It was like, very designy, very pastel colors, and this like really clean UI. And it turned out that what we were actually doing is making a game for non-gamers, like people that sort of had grown up in digital culture and were into sort of aesthetic things, pretty things, usable things like delightful interfaces. And but that was actually very accessible. So Monument Valley became popular with kids and with families and with older people. And I think now that's become a real passion of mine, is like making games for people that maybe don't know that there are games out there for them. Maybe they don't feel part of the mainstream gaming culture. But I think it's really important that we continue to go out and seek new audiences. So that's what I'm passionate about.
Absolutely. Also, being a publisher, Henry, you must actually see a lot of different audiences across titles.
We do. I got a couple of stories. You want to hear the one about...
Options.
Yeah, I can talk about when we thought we knew what we were doing, or you could hear about the one that now we really think we know what we're doing in terms of finding your audience. So the first one or the second one?
So how about first one, which is...
Okay, when we thought we knew what we were doing, it's really about... So if you look at the games that Yoda One used to publish a lot, and we still do, right? So Ski Safari, Crossy Road, Rodeo Stampede, they're all very mass audience, casual games that we kind of try to pull them a little bit into the mid-core, so there's more depth and replayability and live ops and all of that stuff. So when we target audiences, we basically say, how do we get to as big an audience as possible? And we say, let's stretch this so that a 5-year-old can play it and enjoy it, and also stretch it up the other way so that a 50, 60-year-old can also play it and enjoy it. And that makes it really difficult when you're trying to do targeting, because there isn't, right?
It's everyone.
Exactly, it's everyone. So you kind of try to have to find an art style that is a little bit more abstract, right? So, I mean, think The Chicken Cross the Road. You grow up with it as a kid, and it kind of turns into a meme as well when you're young-ish, and then when you're old, you hear about it from your grandmother, et cetera, right? So we look for games that have very accessible art styles, very accessible themes, that there's no presumed knowledge or presumed skill level on the part of the player. They can just download it, pick it up, and get into it. That's kind of how we started off. And then we tried our hand at hardcore games as well. So we've published 4 hardcore games so far. The first 3 were complete disasters, utter disasters. I mean, we killed them off after, I think the longest one we persevered for was like a year and a half. And then what we discovered was we really didn't know our audience when it came to that, right? So the 4th game we did, actually, we did, and it succeeded for all of the reasons that we didn't know about. So we published a game called Transformers Earth Wars. It's Transformers, but it's a really, really hardcore RTS SLG. So we thought, well, broad base is what we know. So Transformers, everyone knows that IP. And SLGs and RTS, that's what we really want to make succeed, right? So we thought if we can match the very broad-based IP with a hardcore gameplay, maybe we'll know what we're doing. Not really, but we made it succeed because that game and live opping it taught us so much about, well, here's how you find your audience, learn more about them, and then we ended up going out to build and find a bunch of tools that then allowed us to get to understand our audience better, target them better, give them what they want better, faster, rinse and repeat. So yeah, last 18 months on Transformers Earth Wars has really been learning what we really don't know about audience targeting, right? Whereas before were very accessible games. Finding your audience and targeting your audience is really easy because you got such a big and broad demographic. So that's it from me for that question.
Awesome.
I mean, if we had 50 minutes each, I could talk
Just keep
a lot
going.
deeper. Yeah.
maybe they can come and talk to you afterwards. Do your story.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So for us, for EA, we're a huge publisher, but we also, thank you. We also have a lot of studios around the world. So the way that, if you're in one of those studios and you want to get a game published with EA, it's very similar to, my experience working for indies, pitching to a publisher or an investor. You have to come to them and say, this is who the game is for. This is what these people want. This is how we're going to appeal to that in a unique way. So it's kind of at the core of how we get our games off the ground at EA a lot of the time. And we're really lucky that we've got internal market research where we can go and survey players, we can talk to them directly, we can see what motivates them, what their play styles are, how many times they play these games, from everywhere from their play styles to their pay styles to where we find them, what they're using to engage in their communities. And then we can be like, what do you think of this game? What do you think of this? And so that's been really helpful, but it doesn't mean that if you don't have access to that, you can't do that. There's actually a lot of small indie market research companies out there that are probably here today. There's probably one in this room after this. But also, you can look at existing communities. You can be like, okay, what platforms are they on? What are they screaming about? What do they want? Okay, so if I want to do something that appeals to them in that way, maybe I should go and talk to them. Maybe I should tweet some of them and just interview them about what interests them. And then, you can group them into segments, and then that's a really good common language that we can use. So Google's got player segments. If you just Google Play player segments, they've already done interviews around the world with thousands of different players, and they've already grouped them into segments and talked about what their social motivations are and then their passion for gameplay. So every studio might have their own language for that, but Google's already got some, so that's good. And then you can talk to your team, is this feature, looking at it through the lens of this player that we've already identified, is this feature going to appeal to that player's motivations? And then you can go back to your investor and be like, yeah, so hey investor, these are the players, this is how many there are in the world, this is how much they spend on things based on research that other people have done. This is, we're going to be talking about this person and this play style whenever we talk to you. And then, if you're working with a big brand or an IP as well, that's something that we find really helpful. They've obviously done a lot of their own market research, they know who loves their brand. Then you can use that same language with them and be like, these people that, your Tumblr fans or whatever, this is how they like to engage with your brand. This is how we're going to engage them with our game. So that's the way we do it.
That's a really lovely point that I'd actually like to throw to everyone if you've got any recommendations. But of course, when you're part of a bigger company, you will have a lot of market research that will help you identify your audience. Do you have any other tips for indie companies or companies that may not have access to those sorts of internal resources? Hard questions today.
I'll lead to Ken here, where Ken had an interesting point where he was talking about the platforms form the audience itself, and making a game suitable for that platform is absolutely essential. Disrupting a platform is incredibly difficult, and people have set expectations. A good example, I'll come back to Little Things again, where when I first made that game, it lasted for 6 hours, it had an end, and then 2 years later, I got my first email saying, "Why does the game end?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? What do you mean? Why does the game end? It's a game. It ends. Then you can play it, and then you can move on to the next one." And then it just snowballed and snowballed, and now that's the email I get the most is, "Why hasn't this game go on forever?" Audience expectations have changed because of the shifts in those platforms, and so it's very important to be aware of how people are interacting with that platform and try not to rock the boat too much. You want to give them something new, but something they understand.
I think that's a nice point that platforms already have established audiences as well. So you can play to an audience that's already there if you choose to make something on one platform versus another.
Switch, Steam, Google Play, all the others, they all have wider,
Yes.
bigger differences than
Diverse.
might immediately be obvious. Yeah.
I mean, as a creative, I think I thrive on sort of punking the audience a little bit and maybe taking something that's established and going, well, what if I do it a different way? So at the time that I worked on Monument Valley, the App Store was thought of as kind of a free-to-play dominated market, and that the wisdom of the day, and it's kind of still the case, is that the smart thing to do is make a free-to-play game, support it with ads or IAPs, and it felt like
How many people had told you to do that over the previous?
Well, I mean,
couple of
that's
years?
the business model that I work for. So.
Well, and it's
Called out?
totally feasible, but the thing is that there's enough market there. Well, we didn't know that. We didn't know that there was enough market. What there was Sword and Sorcery. And Sword and Sorcery is like this very, very beautiful mobile game, unlike anything else at the time. And it was a premium price game. It was sold for like $4. And the fact that existed, it was such an anomaly. It's like there's this landscape of free-to-play games, and there's this one weird hipster thing that doesn't even feel like a game. It's like poetry with like pixel art, and it's weird. And I just looked at that and go, well, if they could do that, maybe I can do something similar. And if it gets a fraction of that success, then maybe we'll be okay. So I think, I don't know, I've never worked at a company that did a lot of market research. I'm kind of more of like, let's just jump in and hopefully, I also think there's a danger of like just making a game that you think you'll like without sort of being aware of what do I like and that's in common with someone out there or like an audience out there. And I think that's where you can be very expressive and say like, I don't know if there's an audience for this, but I'm super passionate about stamp collecting or, bird watching or inline skating or something like that. And then you can go like, I bet someone else out there would play a game based on that. Or showering with your dad. That's a game. That's a game.
That is a game that has been made. Yes, it is. It also seems like, in a way, you've also created an audience for yourself and for the games that you make, which is, I mean, another approach that wouldn't be as easy necessarily, but it's definitely out there as well and worth considering.
Don't try that at home, kids. Not that many succeeded being able to grow that fan base out of nothing.
It's true.
Well, but I say do try that at home.
It's a calculated risk.
do you wanna listen to,
You wouldn't
okay?
go all in.
Yeah.
It's important to test those ideas in a sustainable way.
Well, yeah, and I should
If this one fails, that's okay. I'm going to move on to the next one.
Exactly.
If it's the worst case scenario is you say, if this one fails, I'm out. Because you've gone ahead and built an audience. Maybe you've established something new, but unless you can build on it or innovate or survive, what's the point?
I guess it's about keeping yourself safe if you're going to be taking those risks and mitigating loss, things like that.
But don't build those walls around yourselves. Remember that.
So I'm probably the only one that hasn't made a hit game on this panel, right? I mean, I'm kind of amidst creators, right? My job really is take something that's great and kind of
amplify?
Yeah, make a lot of money with it, right? So, but so that you guys can take that resources and create something
Another
that's
one.
better, right? So I'm less artsy and crafty than these guys are, but it's down to the fundamentals for us, though, right? So, for example, every product meeting and every marketing team meeting I have with my teams, I don't let the meeting start until they can basically tell me who your audience is and what your objectives are with this audience, right? And you'd be surprised that just doing something as simple as that, how it drives a change in mindset. Before we started doing that, every meeting was, well, we're gonna talk about these monetization systems that we're gonna add to this game. It's gonna do this, it's gonna increase ARPU by XXX. And then what I found was, yeah, this all sounds really good, right? But when the rubber meets the road, is this what players want? And what we think they want, what they actually want, could be totally different things. So, I mean, the least we can do is actually what we call an audience map, right? So every system that we're putting in, every change in art style, every update, okay, what audience are you targeting? And when I say audience, it's not just, well, it's someone that plays our game. So let's go back to Transformers for a moment. So we thought that we were expanding the audience by using the Transformers IP. And then we went out and spent like millions on marketing and UA, and we brought in huge audiences. And then, hey, these guys don't pay any money. It's like, it's a hardcore SLG. Aren't they meant to spend a lot of money? And then what we discovered was that not everyone's perception of Transformers is the same. I mean, I grew up with Transformers this was like 30-something years ago, grew up with G1 anime Transformers, and now I have the disposable income to pay for my nostalgia, right? So I could spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on a game. But what about the 16-year-old that knows about Transformers from Toys R Us, from the movies? One, are they going to spend a lot of money on an SLG based on Transformers IP? And even if they had the money, right, is this something that they would like to spend it on, right, or something else? So what we ended up finding was that the bulk of the audience that we were attracting was actually the wrong audience for the game, if we're looking at it from a monetization perspective. It's great from getting an active user base perspective. So now when we target our audience, and when I say finding the audience for Transformers, the filters that we define on some of our marketing platforms and user acquisition platforms is male, 30 to 55 years old, right? With, we literally target to sometimes education standards if the platforms allow, or geographics. And this, the effectiveness of that is spending to buy one user. The value of that user could be 100 times that of spending blindly and just shooting from the hip. So I could actually buy a lot of users very cheap, like say $1 a user on a bunch of platforms. But we spend the bulk of our budget buying users and marketing to a very specific demographic, and it costs us an average of like $20 a user. So why would I want to pay 20 times to get a user? Because that user is actually that player is 100 times more valuable. Right?
I definitely want to touch on UA a little bit later as well,
Yeah.
but before that,
Sorry. So I guess for us, we'll go back to UA, but Real Racing 3 doesn't really do that. We, magically somehow, we just find our people, and it's something that we talk about a lot, but I think it's once those people get into that funnel, we have found what they're there for, and they really love cars, which is great. But we've segmented them again. We did the mapping, like you said. It's not just demographic for us. It's how do they engage as a fan community around cars, and what do they want to do with it? Do they want to collect? Do they want to, it's a racing game, do they want to race against their friends? Do they want to race with their friends? Do they want to build things with their friends towards a common goal? All this sort of stuff for us helps us map our features so that when they're in there, we can direct them to what they're going to enjoy the most about the game. And then, we spend a lot of time on the art and making it look really pretty. And, hopefully if you've got a great publisher or someone that within your studio that has got a great relationship with the platform holder, that's the one thing that I would totally push as your best user acquisition platform for that type of audience. If they're the sort of people that are going to go, oh, well, what's featured on the App Store today? That's who you're looking for. But, hands up here, who would play a game based on what they saw a streamer playing? Anyone? Okay. And then hands up if you would never base your purchasing decisions on what a streamer's playing. Right.
also valid.
Yeah. So again, some people will use that to discover the game, and some people will use other things. And we just found that, for us, featuring has been really good, finding the people that we want to get into the game. So.
Lovely. So we've discussed a little bit about identifying who your audience is. And we have started to touch on where to find them. So obviously different platforms are different audiences. But I would like to open that up to you. Where do you find your people? Once you've identified them, how do you go out there and make them your audience? How do you find them? Where do you find them?
With Crossy Road, that was a concerted attempt to ensure that the game would market itself.
Mm-hmm.
It was probably the memeiest game that I could come up with.
Did well.
Yeah. The notion of, I remember this specific point when we were developing the game, Andy and I, we realized we were going to throw characters into the game, and we were trying to make one another laugh. And so at one point I I introduced the Doge meme. So I got the Doge and then just started to fill the screen with Comic Sans. And then I had coded it incorrectly, so the Comic Sans never actually went away. And so after a couple of minutes playing, like, Andy's screen is inundated with text, and of course he thought that was hilarious. And what I wanted to do at that point was, man, I really want to share this on a social media channel. And I thought, well, there you go. Like, just like, it's an anecdotal story, but it was working from that point onwards. And then, you know, we continued to put characters in and things and stuff, anything that would make people laugh. Like, that was our vector, was the, you know, people watch cat videos for 8 hours a day. Why do they do that? Because, you know, they just simply want to laugh. And so that was what we were trying to harness. We didn't ever do any user acquisition or attempts or tune people. We just made the stickiest game we could, so people would play it for a long time, and then made it the most shareable game we could. And those two factors multiply one another. Like, the longer someone's playing, the more opportunities they're going to have to laugh and share. And then, of course, the more people share, the more people are going to be playing. And that's how the snowball was created. Yeah.
I think I work with sort of a similar strategy. Like, I try to make games that market themselves, which is a lot harder than it sounds. It doesn't mean you don't do marketing. It means that, like, everything from the name of the game to the icon of the game to the art style, like, they all have to work really, really hard to get people to talk about it and share it. So, you know, Monument Valley was designed to look unlike any other game out there. It's and not just unique, but also accessible. It looks friendly enough. It looks familiar enough, and people go like, "Oh, that." It's like that Escher game? Oh, right, that. Cool, yeah, I've heard about that.
It's the game you would recommend to people who have never played a game before. I think that's...
Right,
yeah.
so there's that category of, like, what one game do you recommend on the App Store? And we were like, let's just go for that. So if you feel like you have the skill and the ability to pull that off, then that's one way to find your audience and right? It's like, just make something that, and
Just be Ken Wong. That's
but I, you know, when I think of games that do that, I think of, like, Superhot, for example.
Yeah.
Like, Superhot, the name Superhot is phenomenal, and the trailer is phenomenal, and the art style just doesn't look like anything else. And when you see, like, a GIF of Superhot, you're like, oh, I want to play that. That looks amazing. That's magical. And so I think about that. Like, I think if you can be really bold with your game design so it doesn't look like anything else. You know, GIFs are important, trailers are important, screenshots, the name of the game.
a game that's worth streaming. Like, you didn't
Yeah.
do that with Monument Valley
Yeah.
because that was
No,
brand new,
and I
but
mean-
that's come on since.
And that's one difference between Crossy Road and Monument Valley, that Crossy Road, like, is you can play for a long time, so you can retain an audience for, you know, dozens or hundreds of hours. Monument Valley is over in 90 minutes, so we had to rely on generating conversation afterwards. So we had, like, Monument Valley is actually very finishable. You can finish the game, and for a lot of people, it's one of the first games that they've ever finished, and then hopefully they tell their friends. So yeah, I think that's enough from me.
I think that's a really lovely point, especially for like smaller companies that may not have all that money to invest in UA and things like that, is that you can build a really strong online following. So you should be doing the social media thing, even if not all of you like it, I understand. But it can be a really useful tool in your arsenal, especially if your game looks good and you've got good GIFs and you can generate interest before you even release it. Like, it is smart, and especially a lot of the time it's free if you're doing it yourself. Yes, it's time investment, but it's definitely worthwhile.
Oh, can I just chime in? Ooblets is amazing.
That is, okay, sorry,
Right.
yes.
Like the fact that the room knows
Yeah.
what it is, and it hasn't come out yet. I mean, people knew about it before they signed up with Double Fine, because the name and the art style and the character designs
Very
are just
memorable.
so sticky and so well designed.
It like plays on nostalgia in this really beautiful way.
And they've been really great with their open development. Like their go-to-market plan was before they even started any art or code. They were like, we're going to build this with the community. We're going to engage, you know, we're going to Patreon it. We're going to like tweet every day. We're going to do all that stuff. And like, yeah, I've worked at Bossa Studios and they did something similar. And it was like their plan to be like, we want people that want to be a part of a community and help us build this game together and be open in development. And that's definitely something that you can do as an indie.
A little communications heart is just like, communities are great, so social media.
So let's actually talk about Crossy Road more since we're on the topic, right?
Sure.
So one of the things that surprised both Matt and myself when we launched Crossy Road was how well it did in Korea. That was actually not planned as much as I tell you it was. But, I mean, literally, if you look, back then when you looked at the Google Play charts, there was like a sea of Korean games, and then there was Crossy Road in the #1 spot on the Google Play charts. And it stayed there for like 50 days, literally, 50 days in #1 position.
Wow.
So the initial bump wasn't planned, but then the subsequent stuff was. And it didn't cost a lot of money either. So what we did was, well, it's doing really well in Korea. Why? So we just had our entire teams trying to figure out why. And then we found that because it was so tweetable and it was so viral, BTS picked it up, the Bangtan Boys. Who knows BTS? Yeah. We had no idea who BTS was back then. So, dude, old guy, publisher, right? So we found out that BTS had started playing Crossy Road and they were tweeting it to their fans. And every time there was a tweet, there was like a surge, right? So we thought, how can we make them come back and tweet it again? So we sent them chickens. So 2 weeks later, they're tweeting chickens, Crossy Road chickens, to their fans, right? And then we thought about,
They were
wow.
dressed up as Crossy Road chickens too.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the cheapest marketing we've ever done. Very effective though. And then we talked to Matt about, well, BTS, yes, they appeal to a particular demographic in Korea. What if we wanted to do something Korean that appealed to the broader Crossy Road audience, right? A global audience, right? What's Korean and global? And it was Psy we kind of came up with, right? So, I mean, the first Korean that kind of broke YouTube, we thought, let's reach out to Psy and see if he wants to do something. And the good news was that at that time, Psy hadn't done anything that cool for a while, right? It was like 2 years after Gangnam Style. I didn't open with that, by the way. But you know, he was, you know, it's like American Chinese food. It's what the world thinks Korean is, right? So we kind of created something that was very fun with Psy, and again, that gave us the next set of bumps, but not just in Korea, but worldwide, right? Because Gangnam Style was so viral in all sorts of senses in Western markets, even in China. So yeah, it's not just about getting your initial splash from finding your audience, is really understanding why you got that splash, and can we ride this like a lot more for like 3 years, right? And once you've kind of figured that out, you can do it much more cheaply, much more effectively, much more creatively.
Absolutely. So we are starting to run out of time.
Oh, no.
Believe it or not, we are already at 11:12 and we've got to be wrapping up by 11:20. So I have another question for you, and then I'm going to open it up to all of you to ask some questions as well. But if you can paraphrase this, that would be great. How do you grow your audience once you have identified it and found it and kind of like drawn them in? How do you make it bigger from there?
Like if you do something like with Crossy Road, we had like a big snowball. It was just building and building and building. But then it's just, you know, it's shrunk. You know, that we've reached the peak and then it's just been a very, very slow decline. I mean, in some ways, like continuing to make sure that your audience grows is, you know, it's very, very difficult. You know, maintaining an audience and keeping them entertained for as long as you possibly can. But I mean, very few games have then grown once they've hit that peak.
Fortnite.
Yeah. That's grown, but is Fortnite as big as it's ever going to be? And from now, it's just a long, slow slide, probably.
Subway Surfer.
Subway Surfers did a great job of sustaining its audience for how many years now? 8?
7,
Some crazy
8.
number
Yeah,
of
it's the
time. Yeah.
gift that keeps on giving.
I think sustaining is more important than growing. That's the
So retaining the audience should
Yeah.
be your, okay.
exactly.
That's what I was going to say as well. Actually, I might just jump in.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so yeah, we've got a few live service games at Firemonkeys that have been going for 7 years, 5 years, and 3 years. So yeah, like the main thing for us was finding a sustainable way to retain from update to update. There's actually a talk about it this afternoon. But yeah, like yes, we have the IPs to lean on, which is great and helpful. But again, we had to make sure that we were doing justice to those IPs, and we were like satisfying what players wanted when they see The Sims free play in the store. Like, are they going to come in and get the Sims experience that they want? And then, so we grew it to a point, like you said, and then we continue to retain those players that like the game through our updates. We're always trying to grow the community. We're always like trying new places to communicate with our fans as well. Like, we see where it grows organically, and then we kind of like jump in and give that more attention. So like, we're hoping, like you said, to let the audience grow themselves by talking to each other and sharing, and like in the keynote, the spreadability of our stuff. You know, like The Sims free play is very remixable and very like streamable, and very people can put their own spin on it, which is great. And then we just try and keep them there with really exciting updates. So, yeah.
Retention, any more? Come on, hot takeaways.
I'm bad at retaining audience, but I get bored of the games that I make, so I just want to move on to the next thing anyway.
But do you think you have an established audience between games then, if you're not doing like live service, like, you know, me and Sophie work under that business model? Do you think that that is a different way?
Not really. I think Monument Valley 2, which I didn't work on, would have capitalized on the Monument Valley 1 audience. But I don't know if a lot of Florence players know that, you know, that I worked on Monument Valley before that. Apple knows though. So Apple, right, and actually, the App Store is like sort of one of the easiest app stores to game in a sense, in the sense that like there's only a couple of people that you need to impress, and then Apple's like, well, I guess we'll just promote this app. So it's
Strange advice.
It's very hard, but if you can do it, it's a business model, I guess.
Absolutely. It's another option.
I mean, I know we don't have much time, but like I feel like this room would really miss out if they didn't hear about the power of the Asian market. There's a lot of people in Asia. Is that right, Henry?
Just a couple, yeah.
And
me and my brother and my relatives.
Yeah, we haven't shared this before, but like half of the sales of Florence are in China. So that's more than the US audience, right? Like probably more people have played Florence in Mandarin rather than in English. And that's with almost no promotion in Asia, because we're only on iOS. We're not even on Android yet.
We'll fix that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and actually this is like a big thing that like if your business model, all of you here should include like an Asian strategy, because potentially half your market is there, right? If not more.
That's what we tried to do with Crossy Road. I mean, we made a strong effort to localize that title before we went out, and the Korean localizations were excellent. It had the title really connected with people, and that's formed Henry's down playing his own work on that. But the title and the localization were so strong, people thought it was a Korean game.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
I don't know. It was distinctly non-Korean, though.
I had people talk to me and said, "Oh, that's not a Korean game." Like we fooled some people, if not everyone.
I think the Koreans thought that. So this is what a foreigner's game that tries hard at Korean looks like, right? And they really liked it, and that's not. I mean, Crossy was one example, but when we kind of did Chinese voiceovers for Hand of Fate in China. And the voiceovers, the voice acting wasn't that good the first time we did it, but the fans went apeshit. I mean, it's like, and a foreign game with like Chinese voiceovers, and we rewrote the script for Chinese as well. So it actually sounded like a Chinese game, but the dealer obviously doesn't look Chinese. And the fans just 5-starred it on Steam, and it just went viral from there.
Yeah.
But back to the point about sustaining, though, right? So Rodeo Stampede, which is another Aussie game that we publish, we're into the 3rd year now, about 2.5 years in. We're actually growing the user base year on year. So it is possible, but I'm going to leave you one word, 2 words, kind of, live ops.
Yeah.
So yes, build your game to a same framework, but live op. Make sure that players have something new to come back to every week, even if it's the smallest of changes.
Absolutely. So I didn't mention earlier, but I work for Infinity Plus 2, who make Gems of War. And Gems of War is 4 years running now, and we still are growing our daily active user base, and it's growing quite rapidly. And it's because we have an amazing head of live ops who releases new content every week. And it is not the easiest job in the world. She's a machine. But it's so important when you are doing these games that are going to be, like updated over time, that aren't complete products like upon release as well, that you need to have like good, strong content being released in order to retain an audience or grow it if that is what you do eventually want to do as well.
Yeah, and plan that content, like one update could be appealing to one user base and one update could be appealing to something else. Like this is going to be a bug fix one. This one's going to be for our elder players that are really interested in this part of our app. And you can test it on them. And there's like heaps of talks, today about testing the stuff early and often so that you know that you're going to release something that people want as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone as far as to, for our bigger team, we have like 3 live ops people, and they own an audience each, right? They will just manage whales. I mean, we're talking about people that spend $10,000 US or more in the game. And then we have one person that they'll just manage free-to-play players. So they'll create events that will give rewards, make them active, make them create UGC that goes viral. So yeah, I mean, when you get to the point where you can afford to kind of hone in on specific segments of your audience inside of the game, do it. It's all about understanding who your audience is and what the experience they want out of the game.
Just to summarize there, I mean, finding your audience and understanding what your audience wants. Not every audience wants a live ops game. A lot of people, particularly on Steam, for example, those sorts of games are viewed quite negatively. People want to finish their games and move on to the next one. So you need to make the game for your audience properly. Yeah.
So you have so many different options of different games that you can make, and of course different audiences that you can reach, and platforms as well. I hope this has been helpful for you all. We've had some really, really amazing panelists today, so thank you so much for sitting down and doing this. Would anyone like to ask like a couple quick cheeky questions before we have to wrap up?
Who's making the kill sign?
Yeah.
I don't speak Korean, unfortunately. So
What was that?
What was the Korean name for Crossy Road?
Oh, what was the Korean name for Crossy Road? I got no idea. I could find out.
Yeah.
I'd have to ask my team, but no, I got no idea.
No.
No. I mean, all of the key local markets, we come up with a completely different name that we feel represents the game.
Yep.
Right? So, for example, the Chinese name is Tian Tian Guo Ma Lu, which is like, it's
Every day across the road?
yeah, every day across the road. But I mean, Tian Tian is kind of like a meme that you whack on a whole bunch of stuff, right? There's shows that start with that, and yeah. So, but yeah, net for every major market, the script, the name, everything is completely localized. We kind of don't take one thing and translate it.
Yep.
Any other cheeky little...
That's it.
That's it? Oh, okay, we're getting time. Sorry, everyone. Thank you so much to all